Two rising stars are with us. 1994's winner, Chris Scott. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Jared.
And 2003's rising star, Sam Mitchell. Sam, hello.
How are you?
Gee, you're young. 2003.
What's 94?
Old.
Should Fairest be part of the Rising Star Award?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I think I like the tradition of the Fairest, but what's Fairest back then and what's Fairest now are quite different things. I think there's a difference between intentional and careless. So, I think if it's an intentional act, then perhaps it shouldn't be allowed to be won. But if it's more careless, such as that, then I think that might be something the AFL look at.
Should it align with the Brownlow? I'm so curious. So this is 1993. This is not the 20s or the 30s and the Brownlow holds, it enshrines fairest and best. I've never really heard the Rising Star referred to that way.
No, well, I don't think all the other awards are. It seems to just be I do remember it because I had an iffy incident in my year that I got off, so I was fortunate that I would have been in the same position otherwise.
Do you have an overall view, Chris?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's a relic of the past. Doesn't make any sense to be part of the criteria now. And I think even back in the day, if you think about, have you YouTubed the sensational 70s?
Mm-hmm.
But do you remember the way the game was played back then? Like, say, in the 30s or the 20s, then the fairest element was real. Like, no one's looking at that incident or Sam Darcy's and thinking they shouldn't be eligible for individual awards because they're not fair players. I mean, that's just a nonsense.
No, I disagree. I disagree strongly.
Well, you're allowed to be wrong. It's fine.
No, I disagree. I thought what Sam Darcy did was not a really good act whatsoever, and he got the 2 weeks, not just one. And with that one, what stood out for me with that tackle is it had almost been eliminated from the game somewhat, that really aggressive throw down. So when I saw it, it was quite stark for me to see that happen. And with concussion, as prevalent as it is, I'm sure you've got, people in your teams and who have been suffering from it. I think we've got to be very much aware of the impact of concussion as we've got to stamp it out really strongly, and that was going to contribute to that possibly.
But I don't think that's a matter of being unaware. That's I think if we take your contention through to its fullest extent, you're saying if players have played 300 games and they get suspended once, they're not fair players. That's a nonsense.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in this season that we're playing, if you get suspended for that, I don't think you should win the Rising Star.
Or the Brownlow.
Yeah, no, nor the Brownlow.
OK, because I suspect you think that the tradition in the Brownlow is so sacrosanct that if you've been suspended, you shouldn't win the Brownlow. I think, like, coming out of a game's penalty enough. It's like the best and fairest. Like most teams, if you miss 4 or 5 games from injury, you can't win the best and fairest. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me either, but maybe I'm the outlier.
Did you win it? I think I know this, but did you win it when Corey McKernan was banned?
I did, yeah. Yeah, if I was the second best player that year, I was only the second. He was clearly the best. And I think he might have missed for tripping or something.
He did, which was not a suspension the following year.
I mean, honestly, to be ruled out because of that, I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah, no, I think tripping's less of an act than those two on the weekend.
But my point is, like, everyone will make... If you play for long enough, because I don't think anyone's watching that and think, oh, like Harley, it was poor execution, but no one's thinking now all of a sudden he's labelled as an unfair player and he should be deprived of winning awards for the rest of the year. Now everyone thinks he should be suspended in the current era, but my point is when these things were implemented, especially with the Brownlow, say in the 20s, you could punch a player behind the play and not get suspended. Now because the benchmark for being suspended is so much tighter, and the awards kind of haven't moved with it. And as you say, this award was only instigated in '93. It seems a bit antiquated to me.
So it makes for an incredible race for it now, but does it hurt? It's one of the great feel-good moments of the season, I think, the naming of the Rising Star. On that day, is it going to hurt that the 2 players who we thought of fighting it out are not going to be eligible for whoever is presented?
Yeah, it's interesting. I hope... I don't know what the votes... I hope they're ineligible to receive votes.
That's correct, yes.
That is true? OK, well, I think it'll still have a special moment. I think whoever wins that award, it's not like you're going to be read behind Darcy and Reid. So you're still going to get the 5 votes from each of the contestants, which will be a special moment for whoever does win.
And one of those players who's now emerging is Ollie Dempsey, which is the young fellow that you got. He played really well on the weekend. He's had a really super year, actually. He's playing as the, third tall in the forward line. How would you think he would feel winning the Rising Star if he was able to get up and do it?
I'm not sure. But I mean, I tend to think that to the winners go the spoils. And when you really dig down into the detail and think back and did you realise that these 2 players were ineligible? I think most people kind of forget about it. But I shouldn't speak for Ollie, but knowing him the way I do, I suspect that he wouldn't think for a second that if he won it, that he's automatically had a better year than Darcy or Harley Reid, which would be a reasonable position to take.
It's wide open. What did you think, Sam, of the adjustment to holding the ball? Actually, you coached in the games that had the most individual holding the ball, so you're the sort of the high-end examples.
We had a chat about it and basically said we're not going to train anything. We don't know how it's going to look. Let's watch the games. And then we got to game day and we said, just play, we'll work it out as we go. And I thought we got caught out a few times. I thought the umpires, they had, 3 or 4 days to make the adjustment. I think they got the vast majority of them right. And we definitely made some mistakes, but there's also opportunity to get it the other way. So we thought we handled it okay, and we'll see how it... I think the dust will settle over the next couple of weeks.
Will you train it a little bit now that you've seen it?
I mean, you train tackling and breaking tackles most weeks, and so what they're doing in those moments is slightly different. Even through our game, I noticed players were handling it in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise, where they may have hung on to the ball a little bit longer, but they were choosing to get rid of it without maybe knowing where it was going to go.
What was your view, Chris?
Yeah, it was certainly a drastic change really quickly. Better playing Saturday than Thursday or Friday night. So we got a little bit of a pointer, and I've been impressed with the AFL, particularly this year, how clear they've been on their communication around this stuff. So it wasn't as if we were blindsided. It was just a big change midway through the year. Ideally, you'd like a couple of months to sort of work through it. And I think Sam makes a good point. It's both sides of the ball, so you can focus more on when you're being tackled, but there's an opportunity in there in the way you can tackle as well. So we chose to go after that part of it a little bit more. We probably thought that there are some examples where the ball came out because we were panicked into thinking we might have been pinged, when I think over a couple of weeks I think that'll soften a little bit, but that's only a guess at the moment.
Do you think that players will stop trying to break tackles? Because I found on the weekend players were caught trying to break tackles, which has become a real big part of the game. And I thought to myself, I wonder if players will now stop trying to barge through the tackle.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, that's one of the ways you can take it. I think you need to have more confidence that you can break the tackle. It looked to me like bracing for contact was viewed as prior. And I didn't expect that, and it's not something we could have trained. So, but even if you just braced for contact, if you grabbed it and braced straight away, they took that as prior. So then you have to get rid of it. Whereas if you didn't brace for the contact, there was no prior. So how the time, like every umpire, they're doing it. We're looking at 2 games of footy. I'm sure the umpires are sitting at home watching it, saying, "All right, that one is, that one's not. What's the media saying? What's our coaches saying?" So they're trying to improve every week, and I think we'll all grow through it together, recognising that it's not all going to be right when it's changed so drastically, so quickly.
But I think it's a really interesting point, because if we think back over the last 10 years, like your blink response to the question, who have been the best midfielders over the last decade, I'm going Dustin Martin, Dangerfield, Fife. They're all fight the tackle players. Harley Reid is a potential generational player. He's a fight the tackle player. So if we orchestrate the rules to discourage players from doing that, we're not going to see some of those guys do what they do best. Because the big change here, I think everyone understood within at club level at least, prior opportunity was easy enough. This is not a prior opportunity issue so much. They're saying when you haven't had prior, you've still got to make a genuine attempt. So a lot of the examples that we're seeing are players having an arm pinned straight away. They're effectively saying the only option you've got there to kick it, which puts you in a really vulnerable position to a sling, because then you've got to go onto one leg. So it's like these unintended consequences that I think lead to sort of strengthening the argument that they should take their time to make these adjustments, and the off-season is the best time to do it rather than round 12.
The other one we're waiting on, I think, long-term is the HIA assessments and where they take place. So we had this really peculiar moment in the St Kilda game where Rowan Marshall had banged his head. Doctor wanted to run some sort of assessment. Umpire wants to continue on with the game. Is this best sorted by having the come from the field in these moments? Will we get to that point like we do with the blood rule?
I mean, when I watch this, I think about how quickly our understanding around concussion is changing. 10 years ago, if you saw a player down, you probably went over and pushed him over to make sure he couldn't get up. Whereas now there's much more respect for these situations. And so understanding who's in charge in that moment is not something we've got to yet. But it's one of the ripple effects of the learning that we're having via concussion. And I think the AFL, in general, when there's anything to do with head knocks, they make the rule changes really, really quickly, as we've just seen with the prime opportunity. And I think they'll make a quick change on who's in charge. I don't think we want doctors dictating the state of play, but we do need to be very respectful that they're the ones who, I mean, if it was the physios and the other medical staff, you know, perhaps they're getting in the way and all these things, but doctors, you know, you have to treat them with respect, and if they're protecting a player, then we need to be careful.
So who had the right of way there, you think, Chris? Or who should?
Well, this was a challenging situation, not in the least because it was a protect the lead situation. I think the Saints were, 2 goals up, give or take, 2.5 minutes to go. And this has been one of the problems with the way the umpires have interpreted this situation for a long time now. And they're effectively saying that if a player's in the hands of a trainer and the ball's within 50 metres away, the player has to stop, which is just open to being gamed. It's not just a doctor, it can be a trainer who comes out there. And I think if the doctor had have gone and stood next to Marshall in that situation, the umpire has no choice but to stop the game. But because I think the umpire, and this is my read on it, watching it on TV, so I haven't studied it in detail, but my read was the umpire saw some equivocation from the doctor and decided, no, the play's okay, the play should continue. And I must admit, I'm a little bit more in the camp of the play should continue. You can't just sort of stop the play because the player's got a cramp or a sore finger. Now, obviously, when you take it to the other end of the spectrum and you're talking about concussion, the play has to stop. So that bit's easy. Identifying in the moment, and the umpire's the only one that can control it, is a little bit harder. And there's too much pressure on the doctors as it is. So I'm not sure we want to give them even more.
Sam, we've finally got our timing right. We've just been a little bit out when you'd played well.
Yeah, it was, no, that was not great coming here after bad losses, but after a win, it's a little bit easier.
So the early part of the season seemed to be marked by frustration to sort of pick up where you'd been and get some momentum. Do you feel like you've got some of that now after the 5 weeks we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, talking to the players, takes a bit of time and evidence to build some belief. And we had patches in a lot of the early games where we were competitive, and we hung on to the Cats for 2.5 quarters, and then just too good late, and we couldn't keep them at bay. And so now we've just been able to do it a bit more consistently, and the players are starting to get a little bit of belief, and we'll see where it takes us.
You said belief twice there. Belief in what? The system, each other. What you're trying to coach? What do you mean by belief?
I think the number one thing would be each other, spending enough time together. You know, our forward line has been clunky at the start of the year. We had a lot of new faces, a lot of players who hadn't played together, and now, there's a lot of training and a lot of work that goes into it. So they're starting to understand where each other move and what they like to kick long or short. And I think when you have a little bit better chemistry within your side, then goals are created and defence is a little bit easier, and that's been an improvement across the year. And the boys they're pushing each other rather than always relying on coaches for that.
You're ranked number 1 and 2 for contested ball, and I think hard ball, ground balls, post clearance, which to us layman people shows there's a great hunger in the team. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, I mean, the boys we're hard workers and a young group, very energetic and train quite hard. And I think the other thing that happened is we didn't have a lot of tall depth. I mean, for a couple of games we didn't have, a fullback, James Blank's been injured. We had James Sicily was out with his shoulder. Mitch Lewis has missed the majority of the season, and Marbior was suspended. So we had a very small side, and so we knew we had to get the ball to the ground as much as we could. And what that meant was there was incentive to get to the ball because it was likely that it was going to hit the ground, and our numbers around ground balls has been significant since then. But we haven't been able to keep tackle pressure up as well. And so what we've done in the last little period is be able to balance out defensive pressure and offensive running and try to get the balance between those two things right.
You've got a lot of players in form at the moment. I suppose might be none better than Dylan Moore. Like, he was fantastic on the weekend. But there's a bit of play that Jack Riewoldt and Jordan Lewis spoke about at the end of the game when he passed off. He kicked 5 on the weekend, and I don't know if you gave him the coach's votes. I haven't read them, but I thought he was the best player on the ground. But at the end, he could have had a shot for his 6th goal, and he passed it to Gunston. And the two boys spoke about the connection within the group, the wanting to see someone else enjoy the moment, have a moment. How did that radiate with you?
I mean, it was a fantastic night. I think if he hadn't have passed it to Jack, he would have heard about it. The 2014 boys, Will Day cut off a lead from Jack in the first quarter, and they were fuming on him. But then he passed it to him for his first goal, so he won them back, but only just. So I think, once we had the game won, I think all they did was kick to Jack after that point. And I was so pleased that he was able to get a little bit of icing on the cake, because it's a tough career. Like, even if you have success, you have a lot of down days, and he's had some personal troubles too. And so, for him to be able to celebrate that last 5 minutes of the game was pretty special.
Have you got a rascal pack? Is that unofficial or official? I don't know.
As soon as I said that in the press conference, I thought I shouldn't have said that.
That's going to stick forever now, you know that, don't you?
There's this whole group of players, and they are rascal. You wouldn't call them the Rat Pack. They're not, they're not bad news off the field or anything like that, but they're just rascally. They're always together. They're carrying on. They practice their goal celebrations at training, and they're all... Will Day came and said to me today, what did I do? I didn't know. I was so pumped up, and now I'm getting messages saying what's going on. And these two they're nearly inseparable, that whole little group there. So they had a good fun with that, and I think sometimes what's perceived on TV can be a little bit different to what it's like inside.
Did you set a few things right in the second half in your team?
Yeah, I think we did. But the glass half full assessment of our last month has been the game wasn't that different to the previous month, in that we were poor in parts of the game and pretty good in others. Like, our second half was really good, and hopefully we can take that momentum forward and be a little bit more consistent with what we're trying to do. But again, the glass half full is that we've been beaten by some pretty good teams by less than a kick. We had a really bad one up in Darwin, but I think my sort of assessment of the way the year was going to pan out for most teams, virtually every team, was that you'll have your moments. The Hawks, I'm not saying that they're just having a moment, maybe that they're never going to look back, but I think even the very best teams, I didn't watch all of the game against Melbourne, but they didn't look like Melbourne to me on the weekend. And my response would be, I suspect that's just a sort of short-term blip, and everyone's going to go through it. So then the challenge, if you accept that that's true, is to sort of keep your head above water when it's not going very well, and not get on your toes too much when you do have a few wins. Not that I'm giving anyone advice, but we were 7-0 and didn't feel like we were flying, and then we lost 4 in a row and didn't feel like we were horrible either. So hopefully the shift on the weekend in the second half sets us up for this little period where everyone's we're going through some buys, and there's going to be a few strange games where teams have had 2.5 weeks off and other teams had 6-day breaks. So I think we're probably a month away from working out exactly where everyone sits.
This is probably going to come across simplistic because football's a very complex game. But when I watch Geelong play, when you can't move the ball, it looks really clunky.
Yeah.
And when you can move the ball, a lot of avenues open up. And you're talking about the inconsistency in games. Richmond had control a bit early and you were scrambling. But when the game opened up, all these players were able to be strong contributors. Is that too simplistic to talk about the way you play? No,
I think that's how we observe the game as well. I think the harder part is trying to work out why it ended up that way. And I've said this in this forum quite a few times, I reckon, over the years. It's been true, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, that it's a little bit more when you play teams as opposed to sort of who you play. And I watched Richmond play a bit the previous month. And we saw them play against Essendon and said, let's forget about the games before that because they've shifted the way they play. And then 15 minutes into the game, it's kind of like, this looks like 2019, Richmond. It's like, bad to be us. And the pressure was really hot, and then it started raining a little bit, and it was a bit slippery, and their pressure was really good. So the game was played in a pretty tight fashion. The conditions got better in the second half, and some of our good players got their hands on the ball and it opened up a little bit more. So I think the short answer is we'd like to open the game up a bit more. But I think, if you ask Sam, if you try to play a really attacking style and open the game up early, you can end up 6 goals down really quickly. So the balance there is always a fine one.
Terrific. Great to have you both here. Did you get to the reunion?
Yeah, went to the reunion. They had a very good time.
They would have had a head start.
They did.
I reckon.
Absolutely did.
Sam Mitchell and Chris Scott.